All right. Hi, guys.
Hey.
Hi. Sorry about that. So hi, everybody. My name is Mark Polino. I'm with IBG. I got a room full of folks here with me, and we have folks on the web. And we're going to be recording this, so this is sort of like a Super Bowl presentation here. We're live, we're recorded, we're kind of all over the place. So we're going to try to have some fun. Again, my name is Mark Polino. I know a bunch of people in the room here, but for those of you who I don't know, I'm a CPA and a Microsoft MVP for Dynamics GP. So we're going to try to have some fun taking a look at what's new, and so feel free if you have questions, we'll just sort of tackle them. Folks who are on the webinar, you should have a spot to put in questions, and we'll have somebody looking at that to kind of tackle those pieces, and we'll go from there. So for those of you who are on the webinar, I'm sorry, we have cookies in the room, and you are just screwed. So next time, you need to come on in. All right, so really fast for folks who are in the room, kind of what versions of GP are you working with?
We're on an old version, GP10.
10, okay, I know we have a 9. Anybody else? Anybody want to admit to 6? All right, so GP2015. I have sort of a little different take on GP2015, different from Microsoft. Oops, let me catch up here. Sorry, the Microsoft slideshows sometimes are a little exciting. Sometimes a lot of people don't want to go to a new release, GP 2015 or GP 2013. They say, I want to wait for the next service pack, that kind of thing. In my opinion, GP 2013 R2 was actually the new release. Marketing doesn't work that way. They're not going to let them rename it because of the timing. But there are a number of things in there, workflow, identity management for the web client, some of those other things that are really indicative of a new release. And GP 2015 builds a lot on the things that came out in R2. So from an implementation standpoint, 2015 behaves more like a service pack to GP 2013 R2. So just kind of, you'll see there's some comparisons with the 2013 R2 stuff in here as we go forward a little bit. All right, so Microsoft has this nice roadmap. Is that fuzzy for you guys?
A little bit.
Okay. Chris, how do I fix that?
I have no idea.
All right.
Find out. How's that? Maybe.
No, we got it.
How about that?
There we go.
You just need to tell me.
All right. Checklist, things to add to your session, tall guy. Microsoft puts out a roadmap of where the products are going in the terms of GP. It gets fuzzier, of course, the farther out you get. GP20, you'll see GP 2013 R2 got identity management, workflow, and in GP 2015 we get identity management version 2 and workflow version 2. So it's really kind of updates and improvements to a nice base that came earlier. I'll touch just briefly on R2 for GP 2015. One of them, top features requested by customers. Microsoft has a site called Microsoft Query. You can just Google that and it'll come up. And you can actually suggest features for GP, or you can vote on features that other people have suggested. And if you get a bunch of votes, they stick it in the product. There's actually one of my favorite features in GP 2015 was actually one of those items that someone suggested and got voted on. So we'll see that when we get there. All right, the GP team likes to think in terms of big rocks and small rocks. So if you've ever heard the little thing about how do you fill a jar with rocks, you put in the big rocks first, and then you put in the little rocks, and then you put in the sand, and eventually you've got a jar that is full. So when GP approaches a release, they pick some big rocks, and these are typically things that are going to require significant development effort on their part. And then they fill in with small rocks, which are typically things that customers have requested, but have much smaller development cycles or shorter cycles, or sometimes it's a duh, why didn't we do that 3 releases ago? Some guy can fix that in 2 hours. Let's just do it and get it in this release. So typically they will hold a release for big rocks. They will not hold it for small rocks, just to give you an idea. So these are kind of the big rocks, and we'll touch on them as we get into 2015 and as we kind of get into some of the specifics. Yeah. So the first big rock is a service-based architecture. What does this mean to you today? Absolutely nothing. Service-based architecture, they've reworked the connections into GP so that essentially they can expose almost any part of GP to communicate via an API or with another piece of software. Let's slim this down a little bit. This is a big deal going forward for folks who are going to write applications to work with GP. When we get into integrations and those kinds of things, this will be a big deal. It's not today because there's nothing that takes advantage of it because it's brand new. Simple example, one of the things you cannot do today in GP with a third party is integrate data and post. You can integrate data, but a user's still got to go in and push the post button. The service-based architecture would let you actually design an application that will integrate data and post that data, for example. In addition, with all of the great tools that exist in GP, there are still parts of the system that you really can't integrate to very effectively. We have hacks and workarounds and ways to kind of make it work, but we can't say, I need to integrate segment names. I have 78,000 segments and I would like to integrate the segment names. You're going to do it in a workaround. You're not going to do it with a tool that just does that for you. eConnect is sort of part of this, but if you can imagine everything in GP conceivably exposed to be able to either get information out via an app, via a web app, via something that queries GP, and the ability to bring in every single field inside of GP, you can really make some cool connections as you go forward. So this is one of those things that in 2 years or 3 years, you're going to be going, oh my gosh, I'm so glad they did this. Today, people kind of look at it like, what does it do for me? And it doesn't do anything for you today. Identity management. So GP, a little while back, 2013, introduced a web client for Dynamics GP. And we'll take a look at it as we walk through some of these pieces. And so the web client allows folks to run Dynamics GP over the web. One of the things that they've added is identity management. So today, when you go to the web client, today when you go to the web client, you can now hook the web client in to your local Active Directory, even if the web client is running on Azure. So when your user goes to log in, they can use their normal everyday network login passed through into the web client. You can use if the web client is hosted on your network. If you choose to host GP in the web client on Azure, then the Azure identity piece will actually pass through as well. So again, this is one of those things that is kind of cool if you really need it. For folks who are just kind of upgrading in a normal process, it's okay. I mean, it's cool that I can log into the web client of GP with my ordinary network user. I mean, that's kind of cool. But it only works for the web client. There are no plans at this point to let folks log in with their Active Directory user on the desktop client. If you want to do that, there's a tool that will let you do that called FastPath. We can walk you through that and talk about it afterwards. But today, the identity management piece with Active Directory only belongs on the web client. While we're there, the web client is currently Silverlight based, and they are working on a HTML5 based version that should be out. I want to say late this year is the plan to get that out. And then workflow. I really, really like the workflow feature. I've done a bunch of work with it. I'm going to actually kind of show it off to you. Prior to GP2013 R2, GP had a workflow that was SharePoint based. It was clunky. The dependency on SharePoint got in the way of people and made it kind of a bit of a challenge. In addition, the SharePoint team would make changes that would break the GP workflow. So that was suboptimal for them. So what they did is they ripped out the SharePoint workflow and put in a brand new workflow approval process. R2 came in with workflow, and it gave us purchasing with purchase order approval, requisition approval, time card approval, and timesheet approval. And then 2015 added GL batch, payables batch, vendor approval, receivables batch, a bunch of employee stuff, and then project expense report. What is not there yet and is coming probably in the next release is individual payable transaction approval. Right now, you can approve a batch of transactions, but you can't approve your pay. You can't say, I can't send Chris one payable to approve unless it's in a batch. I could send him a batch of payables to look at and approve. And I think what most people want is individual approval, so that when I put in my AP and I upload my copy of the invoice that I got in, I want to route it around to a couple of people to approve and then be able to cut the check from there. That is probably in the first service pack. At least that's what they're telling me. They try not to lie to me too much. So let's take a quick look at workflow. All right, so this is, we've got GP 2015 here. One of the things that came in with 2013 R2 is purchase requisition. So I can request to purchase something.
That's the desktop version, right?
This is the desktop version. We'll see the web version in just a second, and you'll be surprised at how close they are. So I'm going to say that I want to, I don't know, I want to buy something. And I'm really kind of interested in the new Ferrari 458 Spider. That was actually really pretty when I saw one on the web the other day. Let's do each. I'm interested in one of them. They are about $250,000, somewhere right in there. Anybody else in the room want one? You want to just?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's just get them for the room, right? All right. Let's see what we end up with. And so with requisitions, because I know some of you haven't seen this in this is new in R2. With requisitions, I don't have to fill everything out because sometimes I don't know. I just know we're going to buy a Ferrari. I don't know what dealer the person is going to buy it from, whether they're going to, source it from the factory or go to a dealer here in Florida, have to go down to Miami, up to Atlanta, whatever. I don't really care. I just want a Ferrari on my doorstep. That's kind of where we're at here. So I don't have to fill out the shipping method or the ship to address until we get to the purchasing side. So these have asterisks next to them, meaning you're going to need them eventually, but you don't have to have them just for approval. So I'm going to go ahead and save this just to make sure we don't have any issues. And then I'm going to submit this. And the way that the approval works is that it's email based and it's all Active Directory based. So your users don't have to be GP users at all. The user is going to get an email, and just to, okay, so that's gone out. And there's my email. And this is iCloud Mail, just to prove kind of how cross-platform. This is iCloud Mail on the web, so about as far away from Microsoft as you can get. Just to simulate I got a notice that this item has been submitted for approval. So as the guy who's sending it, we could tell them, hey, it's been submitted, or other kinds of notifications that aren't necessarily the approval, or it's been approved. And then the guy who actually gets the approval, or man, woman, whatever, will that open all the way? Yeah, there we go. It's going to say we've got a PO that's been submitted. You can approve it, you can reject it, or you can delegate it. We'll talk about delegation in a second. This piece down at the bottom is customizable. We've added the detail. I didn't put a description, so we just have an item number there. But from here, generally, I'm going to have enough to approve this. I can't attach anything like a PDF yet. That's in the works as well. But in this version, at this point, they at least get this. These are all the things I'm trying to buy, and this is the total. Gives them an idea. Now, maybe they'll want more information on 9 Ferraris. Maybe not. It just kind of depends on your organization, I guess. There are two kinds of delegate, just to touch briefly on this. This kind of delegate is sort of the ad hoc. I'm in a meeting, I'm in a whatever, and I know this needs to be approved, but I can't do it right now, so I'm going to send it to somebody else for the moment. Or while I might have the authority to approve this, there's no way I'm signing off on 9 Ferrari, so I'm going to send this off to somebody above me to actually, okay that. Then there's another kind of delegate that you can set up, which is essentially I'm unavailable for a period of time. So for this time period, from this day to this day, send all of my approvals to somebody else, somebody that we specify in that particular case. It's I'm out on vacation or at a conference, unavailable type of delegate. So I'm going to approve this. I'm not on the network. I'm out on a beach somewhere, so I'm going to have to log in. And I can make a comment as part of the approval. So when I come back into GP and pull this thing up again, I've actually got a bar here that kind of gives me the status as we walk through, and this says that the approval has been completed, and I can actually view the history here of what happened with this. It was originated and it got approved, but if it got rejected or there were multiple approvers, then the history shows up all the way through. So that's kind of the basics of workflow, and that same you've basically got a matrix or a setup where you say this person can approve this and up to this amount of money or whatever kind of criteria you want. Essentially, you're going to build those criteria when we set up workflow. And you can have multiple approvers. You can have multiple steps in the approval process, those kinds of things. All right, let's talk about a couple of other things. So the big things are for 2015 are the service-based architecture, which you will absolutely love in 2 years. I know that's not terribly exciting, but sometimes you kind of take what you can get. Just like that brand new, that next Ferrari that we're going to get in 2 years is going to be fantastic. Until then, you'll just have to drive the 458s when they show up on your doorstep. And then additions to the workflow. There's they made some pretty significant additions to workflow, and then some identity stuff that they did around the web client. So some of the other stuff, the GP team thinks of them as smaller. I think of them as extremely useful day to day. Yes, sir.
On your workflows, what comes out of the box, and what can you do as far as creating your own?
So that's what I want. A workflow is available to be built for any of these areas. You're going to have to build a workflow from scratch. You're going to have to build your first workflow from scratch, but they're not particularly difficult. The biggest challenge, honestly, is it's a little time consuming because someone presumably you or someone else in your organization, will say, this is what we want it to look like. So, if it's under 5,000, it's this person. If it's over 5,000 in this department, it's that person. And once that person approves, then we want this person who has, dotted line responsibility to then also approve. So once you just get all of that set up and understand what it's supposed to look like, it just takes a little time to build one of these. I would expect GL batch approval to be pretty straightforward just in terms of who you're going to send those to. Something like the purchasing ones are the ones that tend to get a lot more complicated. All right, some cool day-to-day stuff. Homepage settings and other things. So the homepage is this. I'm going to keep doing that, aren't I? Here in GP on our main area page, we've got things like so, for example, we talked about workflow and purchase requisitions. We actually get a box here that'll show us that we've got 6 saved requisitions. We've got 19 that are waiting for action. We've got another 20 that are actually ready for purchase. So someone could actually manage that process from right here on the main window. We've got a report, a daily balancing report that compares my subledger to the general ledger, and I'm out all over the place, so I guess I need to go do some work on that. One of the cool things is if I've got a bunch of quick links here. So if I have a new employee who comes in, now we can copy this homepage to a new employee. So maybe we were growing and I've hired a second accounts payable person. I want their system to look a lot like my first accounts payable person. I can just copy this over and they're going to get the same metrics and shortcuts and everything that the other person has.
On your homepage,
Yep.
I know the old versions, and it looks like yours did too, sort of linked to your Outlook email?
No, that gets removed in 10 or 2010? 2010.
I have it in 10.
Okay. So it gets removed in 2010.
And so my next question is, does that work? I guess the web client mainly, that'll work more seamlessly? Because I saw you using iCloud with something like Gmail, Google Mail.
Yep. Essentially, you can send it to just about anything. The only thing that it doesn't work well with from an email standpoint, if you're sending, if the receiving email doesn't accept HTML, you're not going to get the links. So if someone's on an old email client or they're set to only accept text, you're not going to get the links. For 2013, the email structure was changed, and you have an option for map email or exchange mail when you're sending. So you're not reliant on having Outlook there. You can connect to an Exchange server, and it just works. And the Office 365 server works fine. We're on an Office 365 hosted server, and my GP is local, running on Parallels on a Mac, so about as screwy as you can get. And it just went through an Office 365 server to an iCloud email address.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so Management Reporter is the financial reporting tool, the newer. It's not new anymore. Financial reporting tool. It replaces FRX. There is a new link in GP to this, so kind of bringing the two tools closer together. Inside of GP, we get a connection to Management Reporter reports. And this is going to take a second to load. All right, while that's running, let's see if we have any questions floating around outside. All right. I think we're okay so far. There we go. So I've got some Management Reporter reports out there. If I click one of these, what it's going to do is it's actually going to then go out and fire off the Management Reporter has a web client for delivering reports as well, web-based viewer for delivering reports as well. So it's going to go and fire. That's the default. You don't have to use that one, but that is the default. So it's going to fire that one off and generate my report. And at the same time, we've got some other options in here. I could actually choose to click the MR report and initiate creating a report from inside of GP. It's still going to just fire off the designer at that point, but it will. I could start that process inside of GP rather than having to go and find the icon for MR.
This replaces FRX. Right?
Does replace FRX.
Thank goodness.
Yeah, FRX. Anyway, there's a reason there's no vowels in there. It's kind of like swear words where you're kind of mumbling them if you say FRX enough. Yeah, so the integration, the MR, most of you are on older versions, but the MR connection to GP actually gets set inside of GP now. So rather than going to MR and adding a GP company, you're actually going to GP and say, kind of check the box, and then MR can find your GP company. All right, let's look at some fun stuff here.
Management reporting, is that built into the web client? Or is that,
It is.
Need the desktop?
It is the designer is a desktop client, and it has a web delivery system as well. The big enhancement to financials came before GP 2015. It came in 2013 R2, and that is the ability to copy and paste from Excel into the general ledger. You just set up an Excel sheet, and say edit copy, and you go into the general ledger in GP, and there's a big green Excel paste button, and you click paste, and your journal entry comes in. It's like magic. Really? I think I got time to show it if you want to see it.
Yeah.
Okay. So let me talk about this. Intercompany. When you do an intercompany transaction in 2015, you can see both sides of the journal entry now rather than just your company side. And when you void an intercompany transaction, it voids it all the way through on both companies. And since neither one of those are nearly as exciting as bringing this in, let's see if I can. There we go. Let me give me just 1 second. Let me just grab a file and put it somewhere useful. All right. Well, I'll do it the hard way. Let me just grab a couple of GL accounts here. Good enough. And so the format is description or distribution, account, debit, and credit. And so all I do is highlight what I want here, and I do copy and pop into GP. Go to a journal entry, and I click the big green Excel paste button, and I have a journal entry.
So that test and more
So can you
test.
word it about
They show up right here in the distribution reference.
Okay.
Sorry, was there another question?
If it was an intercompany transaction, would it work still?
I don't know. I haven't tried it, but I can find out for you. If you screw it up, pick an account that doesn't exist, for example. It'll pop up a report, and it will actually tell you it was line number 2. This is the account that had a problem. This is really the line that had a problem, and the account number does not exist. So I've not had one that I couldn't figure out what was going on based on the error message. They seem to be really, really straightforward. And you can bring in an unbalanced transaction because they come in unposted. So if you just want to bring in part of it, you're good. All right, let me keep going here. And so that's a little bit about what I mean, that some of this really cool stuff came in with the last version in 2015 is really building on top of that. 2 things. Payment terms get enhanced in GP 2015. GP20 has actually always had pretty good payment terms, but now they've gone even farther. So if you want to do something like it's due X number of days beyond kind of, especially explain. Let me try. So things like next month, or it's due in 3 months, or it's always due on the 10th of the month, or it's net 30 days plus 3. I don't know why you would want that, but I've seen I've seen folks who say it is the end of the next month. So if you buy it on the 2nd, you're getting 58-day terms, and if you buy it on the 28th, you're getting 32-day terms. But it's the end of the next month. That's kind of a weird term that was always hard to do inside of GP. So we can do, even more in terms of just kind of crazy terms. I'm always a big fan of like pay tomorrow kind of terms or prepay kind of terms, but it doesn't work for everybody. Fixed assets also got completely overhauled in GP 2013. The biggest change, the 2 or 3 biggest changes, I guess, are you can completely undo a depreciation run. So if you run depreciation and realize I screwed it up completely and I just want to undo it all, you can undo it all. The reporting got full historical reporting. So if you want to say, I want to know what my fixed asset status, depreciation, all of that was 3 months ago because I need that for the auditors, it'll do that now. And then one of the enhancements for 2015 is a brand new year-end close report that basically shows you all of the year-end information for an asset. So GP 2015 lets you edit the email for historical documents. I'm still not completely sure that I understand why someone desperately needed this feature, except for maybe resending an invoice or resubmitting an invoice where the contact is changed or left or whatever. That's about, but they sort of stuck it all throughout the system. So my guess is that someone asked and it was easy. This is my favorite new feature inside of GP, and it's really, I'm kind of conflicted about it. because I spend a lot of time and bill a lot of people to clean up their purchase order inventory messes that they make. And this is going to go a long way towards fixing that problem. So in GP now, one of the problems that comes up is an invoice comes in the door, and the invoice is actually for a purchase order. And so items are going to get received. Maybe items have been received, but the invoice, instead of coming in and being applied against that receipt, the invoice just comes in through payables and gets paid through payables. And in almost every case, you're doubling up the expenses, because at the time of receipt, you've got an expense, and it gets adjusted when the invoice comes in. And at the time of payables in, they probably key that to a receipt. So we end up helping a lot of people clean that up and reverse that second expense along the way. The new feature is, once you turn it on, when I go to do a payables transaction, if there are open POs, it's going to warn me. It's not going to prevent me from doing something stupid, but it's at least going to warn me. So in this case, let me grab somebody, put it in a batch really fast. Oops. So I'm going to get a warning message. And the message actually tells me that if I choose continue, it's going to save this, but there's an outstanding open PO. If that's not what you want to do, you can choose cancel and go back and kill this transaction. But the other thing I can do is, if I just want to do some research, I can click go to, and it's going to open up a navigation list that shows me open purchase orders. They'll let me dig into the purchase orders for that particular customer to see, oh, is this really one on a purchase order, or does it really need to go through AP? Most organizations, if it gets a purchase order, everything for that vendor gets a purchase order, but there can be some exceptions along the way. I'm not sure why I'm getting this lag, but I'm getting a little lag. There we go. So then from here, I can use the filter features and the search features to actually find a particular PO that I'm looking for and get additional information. So, if I pick, I'm not sure what's going on down here. We'll figure that out. But anyway, I really like that because it keeps me from making mistakes. And yes, sir.
When you're doing this, there was just one question that was online from Diane about management reporter and the licensing. And with, gosh, I think they did it back in 2010 or 2013. They did make unlimited management reporter users available. So there's not a user count like there used to be on FRX, and then you used to have to buy the individual drill down users, since it's kind of a web app. So Diane, yes, you do get unlimited management reporter users. The point where they would need to be a GP user is if you ever did the drill back into GP from management reporter.
Okay.
At that point, they'd be a GP user as well.
So just in case folks missed that on the web, we had a question around licensing for MR. You get unlimited licenses, unlimited users with MR. The point at which you would need a GP license is if you drill back from MR into transactions inside of GP.
And also, you would still have to be a SQL user for any of those people.
And you would have to have a SQL access license for those users too. But, SQL access licenses, we give those away like candy. Buy a Ferrari and we'll give you like 6 of them. All right, let's take a look at some web client stuff. There's a bunch of HR payroll pieces, and with the licensing change, essentially you're going to get HR payroll as well. What we're finding is there's a significant group of companies who would really like to run payroll in-house, but also really like the convenience of outsourcing and not having to do all of the reporting and those kinds of things. And the reality is when you outsource, you still do all the payroll work. You still got to you still got to enter people's hours and enter employees and manage all of that. It's all of the kind of reporting pieces that you just don't have to mess with. So there are some options to kind of do hybrids around there too, where there's some plugins for GP that'll handle some of the reporting pieces and an online portal and those kinds of things. All right, let me see if I can get onto my web client here. All right, so this is the web client login. Sorry, let me reload that. I forgot which machine I was on. I had the wrong password. Come on. Wasn't this slow earlier, I promise.
Because we're watching.
It's because you're watching, yes. See if that does it. Yep. So you'll notice when it comes up here in a second that the web client looks an awful lot like the regular client. Essentially, they have separated the business logic from the presentation layer. And so the web client is a presentation layer, very similar to the way that terminal services and those kinds of things work. But it's more efficient than terminal server. You can put more users on it, and it's very RAM focused. So in other words, if I'm having performance issues or I want to add more users, adding more RAM would let you scale up the same server. I want to say, I'd have to double check, but I want to say 4 gigs of RAM is enough to support 30 users, which for an awful lot of companies is enough. And it scales up pretty consistently from there. So 8 gigs of RAM is like 40 to 60 users, kind of in that neighborhood on a server. And you'll see we have the same kinds of things as we look at this here. So I'm on the web client. We've got the same pieces that I had before. If I want to look at HR and payroll, because we've got some HR and payroll stuff coming up here, I can pop into HR payroll and say I want to look at my employee card, for example. Now, all of this is, of course, subject to appropriate security and all of those kinds of things. But some of the pieces that are in GP2015, and these are primarily web client based because this is the way you would think of it, is if you're using project accounting, you can do an employee expense report on the web client. Yes, sir?
There was one more question from the web. Angel was asking about non-GP users, or how do I get people that aren't a full GP user to be able to do a requisition in the system, and we can probably talk about the limited light user.
Yep. So the key with with some of this is there are now 3 levels of users. So there's a full GP user. GP user, you want them to use the web client, no big deal. They can use it on the web. They can use it on a desktop. There's also a limited user and a self-service user, and you guys may have to help me with the difference because the self-service is new. But the idea behind those there are certain things that I want users to be able to do, like enter a timesheet, enter an expense report, create a requisition. The approvals don't require you to be a GP user at all. You can have people who can't spell GP if you spot them the G and the P, and they'll be able to approve requisitions via email. No big deal there. Now, whether or not you want those people approving, that's up to you. But certain things like expense reports, timesheets, requisitions, a bunch of employee self-service stuff that we'll look at here in a second, all of those can be done without a full GP user. So Jeff and Ron, can you help me with the distinction between limited and self-serve?
Sure. A limited user is about $600.
Okay.
And is a concurrent license.
So a limited user is $600 and is a concurrent license. So I could have one limited user license, but if people don't go on all at the same time, we could actually have 2 or 3 people or whatever the number makes sense. They're all kind of sharing that license.
Self-service is about $60.
Okay.
And it is a named user.
So self-service is $60 and it's a named user. So every user would need their own license at that point in time.
And SQL licensing still applies. So if you do have a huge footprint of, say, requesters or recruiters that were in there, you probably look at per processor SQL versus just the cows.
So SQL licensing still applies. So for those of you with 10,000 seat implementations and you're all going to do expense reports, you're going to need to deal with that.
Can you have a combination of light and self-service users?
Yes, you can.
You can have a combination of full, limited, and self-service users. And most people will get, when they do their conversion over, they're probably going to have some users like that already because there was some legacy. If you've been on GP for a while, there were some legacy things with Business Portal and FRX and all these different things that kind of had them create some of those users for you. So before you go out and acquire any, if you're looking to implement something like this, you can just look on customer source and see what you have, or talk to Ron and I, and we'll help print that out as well and see exactly which licenses you have.
Yeah, and that's a good point. If anybody was using Business Portal goes away, does not exist with GP2015. Business Portal was kind of a web-based portal for doing some of these things. Essentially, it's all being replaced by the web client. Business Portal had a limited set of functionality, and the web client, conceivably, you can do 96, 97% of what you can do in the full client. It's just subject to security. The limited and light user licenses also get the limited user license, I know for sure, I'm not sure about self-serve, also gives you full reporting ability inside of GP. So not to create transactions, but if I want to view transactions or run reports, again, all subject to security, that's available with the kind of the limited user license. I like to joke that that's the executive level license because none of you want executives putting in transactions or changing them or anything else, but they all say they want to be able to see stuff. So yes, sir.
Another question for the web on a new topic, and you might park this one till later to get into it.
Okay.
But Teresa was asking, how can I reconcile my subledgers most effectively in the system?
Okay. We'll kind of come back to that as we go through.
And then when you do, just make sure if you can repeat the question.
Yeah. So a couple of other things that are new in 2015, really around the web client, is kind of the employee profile. So subject to, again, security, your employees can go in and update their profile so they can fix their emergency contacts and their address and all of that. And this is all subject to workflow. So they come in and they make a change, and then it kicks off the workflow engine and it goes through whatever you've got to allow people to make those changes. Maybe you have a policy where we don't approve these kinds of changes within a particular window because it might affect our payroll that we're in the middle of pulling. So all of that is subject to workflow approvals as well. Same kind of thing. Managers can actually lay out their teams inside of GP, so they can get a sense of, these are the folks who work for me, their position, their history. So if you've got a manager and they want to be able to update their employees' records with notes, with information, make adjustments, changes. All of that's available. Also, it's all subject to workflow as well. So this is where the workflow engine starts to become really nice, because some of these things that you're like, I don't want my employees to be able to just, change certain things that maybe I'm concerned about, because, well, it's like here. Sorry, I'm ahead. Skills and training. It'd be great if my employees could just go in and update their own skills and training. They've taken a test, we've passed it, blah, blah, blah. That's all subject to workflow too. So you can actually validate that, yes, they actually did go to the class, they did take the test, but they can initiate putting that into their record themselves, and then someone just needs to validate that and approve it. Same kinds of things with manager skills. Employees can view their benefits. So, do I really have, long-term disability? Did I pick that? I can't remember. I was talking with this with my spouse, and we were going back and forth, so they can actually view that as well. And if you're using Payroll, they can actually go and reprint their pay stubs from either the web client or the regular client. Again, subject to login and all of that kind of thing. And they can edit their W-4 information, also subject to workflow, so that everyone doesn't claim they have 25 children. Same thing, they can self-edit their own direct deposit stuff. Also subject to a workflow. We don't want people changing their direct deposit the day we're trying to pull payroll. That screws a lot of things up. And we try not to screw up people's payroll. And then there's some additional, we saw some of those lists that these are the POs that are waiting for approval. There's one similar to that for HR. So these are the workflow items around HR and payroll that are waiting for someone to approve. And that way, the minute someone goes in, it's right there in front of them. Canadian payroll for the web client. Anybody running Canadian payroll in the room? All right, I didn't think we had too many of you. But Canadian payroll is new on the web client, as is invoicing. So this is the invoicing module. The vast majority of you are using the sales order processing module. I did find someone the other day who was using the invoicing module, but if you are using it, it's now available on the web client as well. And then a couple of business intelligence things. So GP has a set of refreshable Excel reports. If you're on 10, you have this. If you're on 9, you do not. If you're on 6, this is just a pipe dream. Essentially, these are live Excel connections into the GP data. So I can open up an Excel report. It will pull in data from GP. Tomorrow, when I open up that same Excel report, I can click refresh, and it will bring in the latest data from GP. What's cool is to run those Excel reports, you don't need anything special. You don't need a GP login or anything else. It runs off of Active Directory permissions. With GP 2015, so GP has a set of, let me step back a sec. GP has a set of ad hoc reporting called Smart Lists. Everybody have a clue what a Smart List is? Okay. With 2013, they added a product called Smart List Designer, which lets you build your own Smart List. Previously, they'd used a product from E1, and they decided to build their own. So this is built into GP. It's called Smart List Designer. With 2015, they added the ability to not only build your own Smart List, but you can build your own refreshable Excel reports. So, if there's something out in payroll or someplace else that's not available by default in GP, you can actually build your own and deploy it. I don't have a ton of time to show that off, but if someone is not showing you the refreshable Excel reports, come hunt me down and I will show it to you. We'll take 20 minutes and I'll show it to you on a webinar someplace. It's just incredibly cool. The GP team, like much of Microsoft, is pushing into other areas. One of the things they did is a product called Business Analyzer, and Business Analyzer is essentially a delivery platform for reports, charts, graphs, that kind of thing. It's based on SQL Server reporting services, so it's delivering SSRS reports. There's a desktop version, so if you just need to give an executive pretty pictures, this works great. There's also a Windows 8 app, and there is there now an iOS app for this, for Management Reporter? Oh, sorry, for Business Analyzer.
I think there is for the iPad.
Yes, there is. There's an iOS one, and there's either an Android one or it's on the way. They're trying to be more kind of cross-platform centric. They would like to build more apps for things like Pio Approval, so that rather than just being email based, you'd actually have an app for Pio Approval. That hasn't happened yet, but I know it is on their radar for those kinds of things. All right, so just again to kind of give you an idea, SP2 was GP2013, so kind of a bunch of stuff came in with that. R2 got a bunch of big things, copy paste, being able to undo a fiscal year. So if I close my fiscal year and realize we goofed, or if maybe we've been acquired or something else, and we need to go back more than one fiscal year, you can open up fiscal years as far back as you want, make entries, and then reclose them all the way forward. So an awful lot came in with R2. The official strategy, the official word, is previously they would deliver roughly 120 new features in a release, and a release was every 2 years. They're trying to do is deliver about 40 new features now in a new release, and then have 2 interim releases before they get to the next version. So GP 2013 had about 40 new features, SP2 had about 40, and R2 had about 40. So over the lifespan, they get to 120 new features, but it allows them to avoid that kind of big bang delivery. They're able to deliver more often and more features more often. So, for example, if something didn't make it into 2015 that you really, really wanted, rather than waiting 2 years for 2017, you might get it in May with Service Pack 1 or with an R2 release.
Can you repeat what you said about the opening up historical?
Yep. Starting with 2013 R2, if you want to post into 2007, you can open them back all the way to 2007, do an entry, and then close them all the way forward. And if you desperately need to do that earlier, we know how to do it. It involves voodoo and goats at midnight, but we can do it. So, and part of that is the GP strategy is changing in the way that they deliver. Waiting for the service pack, I have mixed feelings. I wish they would deliver a service pack that was fixes only, because it's a whole lot easier to get something to people to apply that, because they don't have to test a whole bunch of new features to make sure that they don't break stuff. But that's not the model they've chosen. You're going to get both bug fixes and new features. So waiting for the next thing, you're going to be kind of always that next thing. I think you're going to have to pick a point and jump in, and 2015 is not a bad place to pick a point and jump in at this point. See if there's anything else that sort of stands out. And then we had one quick question. You'll notice that once workflow came in with R2, they were able to add a whole bunch of other stuff on the HR payroll side because they had the workflow to control it. It's tough to let people change their W-4 when you have no way to control that type of thing. You also see the web client really got just about everything in GP 2013. What came in with Service Pack 2 were kind of the outliers that were harder. Manufacturing, little tougher to stick in a web client than, say, general ledger. Those all kind of came in with SB2, and then 2015 just got the last pieces. There's a couple of things you can't do, and I can't even tell you what they are. They're so obscure in the web client. They're the type of things that you'd really want to be on a machine anyway to make happen, maintenance type stuff. All right, let's see. We had a question kind of from the web. It's what's the best way to reconcile the general ledger to the subledger, which is a interesting question. And so I'll give you the nutshell version, and then you can shoot me an email and we can dig deeper. The nutshell version is first, make sure that all of your control accounts, so bank accounts, AP, AR, inventory, all have the setting marked to not allow account entry. So the allow account entry box needs to be unchecked. And what that means is those will be forced to flow through the subledger. You will not be able to key directly to those accounts. And let's face it, you shouldn't be keying directly to those accounts anyway. They should all be flowing through the subledgers. So that's the first thing. That'll prevent you from making journal entries into those accounts. There is a tool inside of GP that will take your subledger and your general ledger and put them side by side in Excel. It is called the GL Reconcile tool. And essentially what it does is it tries to match your subledger to your general ledger. When it finds a match, it shows them as matched. If it thinks it matched them, there's a potentially matched section, and otherwise there's a, hey, these are missing section. If that still doesn't get you there, there's a tool that's available for GP from Reporting Central. It's called the Closer. It's really very, very nice. Essentially what it does is it takes, does similar to the GP tool, but it's much cleaner in terms of telling you what went wrong. The GP tool just tells you I can match this or I can't. The Closer will actually say, hey, the date for your general ledger transaction is different than the date from your subledger transaction, and they're in different periods. That's why you're out for this particular transaction. So it goes a lot deeper in terms of explaining why you're out and giving you so that you can figure out what you have to do to fix it and put something back into balance. Any other questions?
Just to mention too, you've done your PowerPoint, and it's typical that we'll send this out to everybody on the list.
Yes.
To other people online too.
Yes. So we are, as I mentioned, we have a live studio audience here, and we're going out through GoToMeeting over the web, and we are recording this at the same time. So once we are done, it takes us a day or two to kind of process the recording, and then we'll get it up and we'll get the link out to everyone who's on the list to attend this.
And we'll email the PowerPoint too to anybody registered.
And we will email you the PowerPoint. And those of you in the room, just kind of hang out. Your Ferraris will show up in a couple of days. Those of you who are on the website, I'm sorry, you're just kind of out of luck.
If you just want to touch on two new features that you've seen, we've gone to a new way to send out our invoices, so customers will be seeing those.
Yeah, we sort of talked about, we talked briefly about emailing stuff out of GP. And frankly, I'm having a conversation with the GP folks at Convergence about this. There's some things in GP that are just way too hard still to set up. Emailing out invoices, emailing out remittances, those kinds of things are just kind of more work than they should be. So here at IBG, we're working with ViewPost, and ViewPost allows us to do a customer vendor portal up on the web, no charge for that. So our customers can see what's due. Our vendors can ensure that we did get their invoice, and cuts down on questions and those kinds of things. And then we can also use their sync engine to send out our invoices. So if you're getting an invoice from us, it's going to come through them. It's going to have information on the bottom that says, hey, these are your outstanding invoices, so that if you missed anything, you've got it there. And then there are even options for you to just pay that invoice using ViewPost system. Same kind of thing can also be used to pay accounts payable with electronic payments or check payments. They handle it all for you. It's really, really reasonable in terms of versus getting an envelope and a check and a stamp and all of those other kinds of things. So we'd really encourage you to spend some time looking at ViewPost and their platform. The nice part is, frankly, you can put up a vendor and customer portal for free, take a look at it, see how it works, and then be able to decide whether or not you want to do payments and stuff through it. Honestly, I set it up on a test company that I've got, and it was faster to set that up than it was to set up ACH plus email remittances alone inside of GP. So we'd really encourage you to take a look at that as well. And that is viewpost.com. And the closer is reporting-central.com. And if you want more stuff like this, I do lots of blogs and all kinds of cool stuff around GP at dynamicaccounting.net. And if you are not going to, you're going to Convergence. So Convergence is Microsoft's premier customer conference all around Microsoft Dynamics. There'll be 12,000 people there, something like that. A good number of them are really nerdy accountant technical people like me, so it's fun to go hang out with those folks. And we would love to see you there. It's in about a month in Atlanta. So if you'll just hit your favorite search engine and for Microsoft Convergence, it'll pop right up.
Let us know if you're going, because we'll buy you dinner one night.
Yeah, we'll buy you dinner one night. Just one caution, make sure you put in Microsoft Convergence. There's apparently another Convergence event that happens at the same time that is something around women who are attracted to fat men. Some of us considered switching conferences, but we decided that we'd go to the GP one instead. All right, guys, I think we're at our time here. Let me let y'all go. We'll get the recording stopped and rolling. And thanks, everybody, for being here. We appreciate it.